We are back, and we're in the middle of a great discussion, and we're talking about when someone does pass away and having the correct documents in place and how it all works. And, you know, it can be very convoluted. Who knew?
Right. And he was talking about people frequently do not look at a last will and testament before the body is cremated or put in the ground.
Okay.
They just don't take the time to do that. Usually. People frequently come to me and say, well, I really want to have cremation in the will. I say, well, you know, there's a good chance nobody's even going to look at that. We can put it in there, but there's a chance that nobody's going to look at that. Make sure the personal representative named in the will knows that you want to be cremated. That's number one.
Okay. Because you said as long as I put it in my will, that trumps everything?
That trumps everything right there. Regardless of what the spouse says, regardless of what anybody else says, the will is the number one priority. If it's an actual will that's been properly witnessed and executed, then that's going to take priority over everything.
Is it important to have a will when you're young and then continue to revise it?
I don't want to say this flippantly, but we all know it's important to have a will before you die. If we knew when we were going to die, we'd all get a will the day before. But we don't. So it's important to have a will as soon as you can. And when you're young, you know, a lot of times it does have to do with property, not always, but if it's a teenager or a very young person that doesn't have much property, they still need a will for beyond what we normally think of. We think of it in terms of property, but it could be a final paycheck that's owed to the individual, certain things like that wouldn't be covered, and you don't want to have to go to court to get some type of special formal proceeding done, and that's what would be required if you don't have a will in place.
Well, it's funny, my daughter is going to have a baby, and they keep talking about, do they need to have a will? Oh, we should go do this. We should maybe sometime down the road.
Well, I'm going to jump in because we had a discussion with somebody that's familiar with this set recently about that. Is if you're going to have children and you're expecting children, you definitely need to have a will because you want to be the decider of where that child goes upon your death. You do not want the state to decide who's going to take care of your child. And that's the number one priority for any parent out there, is to make sure that they have that in place. Absolutely.
When you bring up a good point, I was thinking about this, you know, you're talking about getting a will as you're younger. You know, things change in your life. People get remarried, no one goes back and revises that will. I can imagine you see stuff like that all the time, right?
Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Life insurance policies too. I mean, there are tons of times someone will come in with a life insurance policy for an assignment, you know, to pay the funeral bill. You know, maybe the beneficiary is deceased, or maybe it's an ex-wife that someone just never thought to change. And sometimes that gets a little sticky.
Yeah.
You can always make sure that your wishes, your final wishes, are made as far as funerals go if you come in and pre-arrange and prepay it, or sign a letter that says, this is me, this is what I want, this is what I want done. And then that pretty much takes care of everything. There's no real changing that.
And with regard to the issue on life insurance, there is a change in the law in the last, I guess, 10 years in South Carolina. First of all, one thing that's been true for a while is an ex-spouse is written out of the will automatically by law upon divorce.
Oh.
Got it.
So that person is automatically written out of a last will and testament as beneficiary. That change doesn't need to be made necessarily, although you don't necessarily want your new significant other to have that name in the will.
Right.
But secondly, with life insurance, we did add that to the code recently too. So an ex-spouse is written out of a life insurance policy as beneficiary automatically under law upon divorce.
Then then where does it go?
It falls to whoever the contingency is, which I always tell people, if you didn't name a contingency, the life insurance policy named one for you. Frequently it's either next of kin or it's your estate.
It's either next of kin or it's your estate.
Not always, but the life insurance company is the one that determines who that contingency is if you didn't name somebody yourself.
I feel like every time we talk, the four of us talk together, I leave with all these takeaways.
I learn something
Don't you?
every show.
Every single time.
But do you do anything about it? That's the question.
Are you proactive?
It's all about the stages of change. I'm in my pre-contemplation.
Or procrastination.
Or procrastination, exactly. Stay with us. There's more to come.